My dad picked my cousin over me, pouring money into his future while mine crumbled. But karma's a funny thing, and now he's drowning in regret as I build my own life. I never thought I'd share this, but here I am. I'm 28 and life's been tough, especially with family. My mom passed away giving birth to me, which pretty much set the tone for my relationship with my dad. He never got over her death and always treated me like I was to blame. I don't remember my mom, but relatives always talked about how excited she was to have me. She'd struggled with fertility for years before finally getting pregnant. Knowing that just makes it all the more heartbreaking. Her dream realized, then tragically cut short. Our home was a shrine to her memory. Photos everywhere, her clothes still in the closet, books on the shelves. It felt like I lived with a ghost. Sometimes I'd sneak into their room just to touch her things, desperate for a connection with the mom I never knew. My relationship with my dad was the opposite. He was physically there, but emotionally, he was miles away. He handled the basics, food, clothes, school, but there was never any warmth. No hugs, no I love yous, not even a pat on the back. I always felt like an outsider in my own home. Most days he barely looked at me, let alone talked. When he did, it was usually to criticize or compare me to my cousin, Jake. Jake's dad, my uncle, died in a car accident when Jake was 7, so my father took him in. I remember the day we got the news, a rainy Tuesday. I was doing homework when the phone rang. My dad answered, and I watched his face crumple. That was the only time I ever saw him cry. After he hung up, he just sat there, staring into space for what felt like hours. Jake started spending a lot more time at our house. I was excited at first, thinking another kid would make things fun, maybe even help my dad open up. But I quickly realized Jake's presence made things worse between me and my dad. It was always, "Why can't you be more like Jake?" Or, "Jake would never do that." Jake seemed like the son he always wanted. I was just there. Jake was sporty, friendly, and charming I wasn't. He was the life of the party while I was shy and loved to read. It was clear who my dad preferred. I worked so hard to make my dad happy, but it was never enough. I tried to learn about his interests, got good grades, joined sports teams. My dad never seemed to think Jake could do anything wrong. He'd compliment Jake on the smallest things, but I never got credit for my accomplishments. When I was 12, I won the school science fair. My project was a complicated moving model of the solar system. I worked on it for weeks, so excited to tell my dad, thinking this would finally make him proud. I got home to find him laughing and talking to Jake about a football game. I told him I won, but he just nodded and went right back to talking to Jake. It was like I wasn't even there. The college kickback, the favoritism got worse as we got older. People would tease Jake and me for being in the same grade. I did better in high school, but my dad would always downplay my achievements. "Jake's got more important things to think about than just grades," he'd say. During one parent-teacher conference, my English teacher raved about an essay I'd written, calling it one of the best she'd ever seen and saying I'd be a great writer. My dad just grunted and asked if it would help me get a big sports scholarship. The teacher looked confused, and my face burned with embarrassment. Despite all this, a part of me still longed for his approval. I thought maybe if I just found the right thing, the magic key, his adoration would unlock. I chased that impossible dream all through childhood and my teenage years. Then came college, and the real blow. I'd worked my butt off, got into a decent university, and was ready to launch my future. I knew money would be tight, but I figured my dad would help out some. Boy, was I wrong. The day I overheard him telling Jake he'd pay for his entire college tuition is burned into my memory. My heart sank. When I asked if he could help me too, my dad looked at me like I was crazy. "Jake needs it more. I can't afford both of you," he said. Just like that, my college dreams vanished. I tried to make it work, working evenings and weekends at a local diner. I applied for every scholarship I could find, but it wasn't enough. The strain was unbearable, juggling classes, work, studying, and sleep. Something had to give. After the first semester, I had to drop out. I couldn't afford it. My part-time job barely covered tuition. Meanwhile, Jake was living it up at a fancy university, all on my dad's dime. He'd share photos on social media of his luxurious dorm room, his spring break trips, the new laptop my dad bought him. Every post was like a knife twisting in my gut. That was my breaking point. I packed my bags and left home, cutting off all contact with both my father and Jake. It hurt like hell, but I knew I had to escape that toxic environment. I couldn't live in the shadow of my deceased mother and the cousin who had somehow replaced me in my father's heart. Building my own path. The past few years have been incredibly tough. I took on every odd job imaginable to make ends meet. Waiting tables, construction, gas station night shifts, anything to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. It's been hard, especially seeing Jake's social media updates about his amazing college experiences and the great job he landed after graduation. But despite everything, I'm slowly building a life on my own terms. I have a decent job now, nothing extravagant, but it covers the bills. I'm a manager at a local bookstore. It's not the career I envisioned, but I find peace surrounded by books. Plus, I'm taking night classes at community college, working toward the degree I always wanted. It's not easy, but at least I'm doing it for myself. Along the way, I've made incredible friends, people who accept me for who I am, not who they want me to be. They've become the family I never truly had. We have weekly game nights, go camping when we can, and support each other through thick and thin. It's far from perfect, but it's mine, and that makes all the difference. A call from the past. I thought I'd left all that family drama behind, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. Yesterday, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, I was stunned to hear my dad's voice. It had been 3 years since we last spoke, and now he was asking for help. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but one thing's for sure. I'm not that kid desperate for his approval anymore. Update 1. Standing my ground. It's been a week since my dad's call, and I'm still processing it. Hearing his voice brought back so many memories. Mostly bad. But his voice was different. Older, more worn out, more desperate. He started with awkward small talk, asking how I was. It felt forced, like he was pretending the last few years never happened. Then he got to the point. He needed money, a lot of it. At first, I was too shocked to speak. This was the man who never gave me a dime for college, who chose my cousin over me countless times, and now he was asking me for money. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I finally found my voice, I asked why he was coming to me. What about Jake, his golden boy? Shouldn't he be the one to help? My dad was silent for a moment, then mumbled something about Jake being busy with his new job and not having the means to help right now. I couldn't help but laugh. After years of being told how much better Jake was, how he deserved opportunities, I didn't. Now I was supposed to step up? I made it clear exactly what I thought of that idea. I told him to go talk to Jake since he'd always been the favorite anyway. There was a long silence. Then my dad started talking about regretting some of his choices, wanting to make things right. But I cut him off. Too little. Too late, I told him. I'd spent years trying to earn his love, and now that he needed something, he was ready to play the remorseful father. I ended the call shortly after. A mix of emotions hit me. Part of me felt bad for turning him away. He was still my father, but a bigger part felt relieved. For the first time, I had stood up to him. I didn't cave to that desperate need for his approval that had driven me for so long. The next few days were tough. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering if I'd done the right thing. I thought about all the times I needed help and he wasn't there. Not just college tuition, but all the little moments a child needs their father. School activities, dating advice, learning to drive. He was missing for all of it. I remembered, My first heartbreak at 16. Sarah and I had been dating for 6 months when she broke up with me for a football player. I was devastated, came home crying, but my dad, glued to the TV, barely looked up. He just grunted and told me I was blocking the screen. I cried myself to sleep that night, or the time I got my driver's license. Most of my friends' dads taught them, but not mine. I had to beg our neighbor, Mr. Johnson. When I passed, I rushed home, excited to share the news. My dad was in the garage with Jake, working on his car. Jake congratulated me, but my dad just nodded and went back to explaining something about the engine to Jake. I don't think he ever let me drive his car. Another thought gnawing at me. What kind of trouble was he in to need my money? My dad was always so proud, almost to a fault. It had to be serious for him to reach out like this. Even with everything, I was still a little worried. But then I thought about all the times I had worried about my own future, because I couldn't make enough money after dropping out of college. What did he care then? I had to figure things out on my own, which I did. I built my life without his help. Why should I help him now? I remembered that first year after moving out to start fresh. I moved to a new place where no one knew me. Took any job I could find and rented a tiny studio I could barely afford. I cleaned during the day and bartended at night. I was always exhausted. Some nights, coming home from the bar, my feet aching and smelling of smoke and beer, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. I could have swallowed my pride, stayed home, and tried to work things out with my dad. But then I remembered the constant judgment, the never feeling good enough, and I knew I'd made the right choice. As the days passed, I started to feel better about my decision. I realized that by not giving in to his request, I was finally taking control. I wasn't the same kid. He could ignore and push around anymore. Today I'm an adult. I make my own choices, and I don't owe him anything. Still, I was curious. What exactly had happened? Why couldn't Jake, the perfect child, help him? There were times I wanted to dig deeper, but I hesitated. Did I really want to open that can of worms? Was it worth potentially stirring up all that old pain and resentment? I thought about contacting Jake's mom, my aunt. Even though she could be cold, she was always decent to me. She might know what was going on. But the last time I saw her, at a family gathering before I left, she gave Jake a big hug, telling him how proud she was of him getting into such a good college. When it was my turn to leave, she just gave me a weak smile and a pat on the shoulder. I decided not to call her. I'm still not sure what to do next. Part of me wants to forget the past and focus on my own growth. On the other hand, I can't help but wonder what's going on between my dad and Jake now. Only time will tell if I decide to investigate further. Update 2. The truth revealed. It's been about a month since my last update, and a lot has happened. Despite my hesitation, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to do some digging, to find out why my dad suddenly needed help and why Jake wasn't stepping up. I started by reaching out to a few family friends who were still in touch with my dad. At first, they were reluctant, but eventually I pieced together a clear picture of what had been going on. I called Mrs. Peterson first. She was my mom's best friend and had always been kind to me. She seemed surprised to hear from me, but happy to chat. After some small talk, I steered the conversation toward my dad and Jake. Mrs. Peterson hesitated, then sighed deeply before filling me in. It turns out my dad went all in on supporting Jake, far beyond just college tuition. He helped Jake with a down payment on a house, bought him a car, and even invested in a business Jake wanted to start. To do all this, my dad took out loans and maxed out his credit cards. He was drowning in debt, all for Jake's supposed future. Mrs. Peterson told me about a conversation she had with my dad a few years back. He was bragging about Jake's successes, talking about him becoming a big-shot businessman. When she asked about me, my dad just shrugged and said he hoped I was doing okay. The indifference in his voice had shocked her. Next, I called my old neighbor, Mr. Johnson, the one who taught me to drive. He's always been observant and filled me in on more recent developments. Apparently, Jake had convinced my dad to invest in a startup with some college friends. Some kind of tech company. Mr. Johnson wasn't clear on the details. What he did know was that my dad had remortgaged the house to get the money for the investment. The kicker: Jake's new job, the one my dad proudly boasted about, wasn't going well. The business venture flopped, and Jake was now struggling himself. When my dad turned to him for help with the mounting debt, Jake apparently said he couldn't spare anything. Mr. Johnson overheard an argument between my dad and Jake just a few weeks ago. Jake had shown up in a flashy new car, and my dad confronted him about the failed business and the money. Jake yelled something about it not being his fault, that the market changed, and he'd pay my dad back when he could. Then he peeled out of the driveway, leaving my dad looking utterly defeated. I have to admit, a part of me felt a twisted satisfaction. After years of being compared to Jake, constantly hearing how I didn't measure up, it turned out the golden child wasn't so golden after all. My dad had poured all his hopes and resources into Jake, and now those hopes had crumbled. But mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of the endless drama, the lingering pain, and the constant what-ifs. I thought about how different things could have been if my dad had invested in me the way he did in Jake. Maybe I would have finished college. Maybe I'd be in a different career today. But then again, maybe I wouldn't have learned the invaluable lessons about self-reliance and perseverance. I remembered the tough times after dropping out, juggling multiple jobs, often scraping by on ramen noodles and cheap coffee. I thought about the long nights studying after exhausting shifts, driven by the determination to improve myself, even without a formal education. It had been a hard journey, but it shaped me into the person I am today. I wasn't sure if I should tell my dad what I'd learned. After some thought, I chose to text him. I told him I knew what was going on with Jake and his debt. I didn't offer to help, but I also didn't gloat. What I really said was that I hoped he could see now that the decisions he made had consequences for both of us. After a few hours, he replied. A long message, full of apologies. He said he knew he'd been unfair to me, that his grief over my mom's death had made him lose his way.